Hi, it's good to be here to show you what we've been doing with the Crypt over the last couple of months. Um, some things I'm going to talk about today: who we are, how we got here, game demo, something on relics and lore. Locket's going to talk about, and then a little bit on what's next. So onwards, who we are. This is us, and you'll notice a couple of things. Number one is that there's a few of us. Secondly, that we're not anonymous. Um, This is me. I'm Demore here in the Discord, or David in real life. Lockett, who will be speaking in a moment, goes by Lucy. She's our analyst on the team. And our CTO is Ian, who goes by Sportsbeard on the Discord. And now all of us work in the games industry, working at companies like Epic and Electronic Arts and Take-Two, and we've come together to build blockchain games. So there's a lot of, we're all sort of game nerds. We're people that worked in the games industry for some time. Really fun to be jumping into the Lootverse. We're based in the UK, specifically here in a city called Brighton in the UK. And one of the things I wanted to say was that we're approaching the Crypt as a series of chapters. So today we're talking about chapter 1, but that internally we're calling Loot Dungeon, which is just for OG loot holders, and on Ethereum mainnet, but we're building out the game over a series of chapters. So for instance, next chapter, we're probably going to be taking mLoot as an NFT, and maybe moving to a different chain at a later date in future chapters. But exactly what in those chapters is yet to be decided fully. We're going to be seeing how the first game goes and working with the community and talking in the team to establish what's going to be in those subsequent chapters. Ultimately, we were building toward a 3D dungeon. You can see here listed as chapter N. And, I'm not sure exactly when that will come. We've got members of our team already working on that, so it is something that we're building, but you can see that we have these series of chapters, and maybe they're 4 or 6 weeks apart. As a company philosophy, we like to do something small, learn from it, evolve, and continue building as we're working with the community. A little note about how we got here. Of course, like everybody else, we started with this tweet from Dom talking about loot for the first time back in August of last year. And truthfully, I think when we first heard about it, we couldn't really wrap our heads around it. You know, the idea of starting with a game element rather than starting with the game is something brand new. And in fact, it took us about a week before we really understood the advantages of that, by which time all the original mints had gone and we had to pick up our loot bags on the secondary markets. Now, our view is, loot is really the most important new idea for the games industry in years. The idea of starting with a game element and building outwards with the help of the community is so powerful. And moreover, I think it really represents a lot of things that are going to be important in Web3. So composability, interoperability, working with the community, permissionlessness. So we threw ourselves into loot as a company, and really that's proven to be a great decision. We've really pleased with what we've been able to do with the Crypt. Anyway, onwards to a game demo, and in fact, I'll start with a trailer that is a teaser of what we're going to be doing. And you can see that at the end there, you can see that we're going to be releasing the Crypt Chapter 1 on the 27th of January. So a very, very high level description of what the crypt is. Dungeons that you can raid if you have OG loot. If you're successful in a raid, then you can earn our relic NFT. And those relics, the earlier relics, are more valuable. So here's screenshots that I took from the game earlier this morning. So we got this currently running on Rinkeby, just finalizing some of the aspects to it and removing some of the bugs. This is the landing page. After I get to the landing page, I can go in and I can see there's a series of chapters. A series of dungeons. Each one represents one of the orders of loot. Now there's 16 dungeons, only 8 of them here on my screen. If I was to scroll down, I'd see the others. You can see in this test version that we have running, some dungeons, such as the Dungeon of Power, have been defeated. Some dungeons, such as the Dungeon of Brilliance here, have already dealt some damage. Some dungeons I can raid for damage, as you can see here. So let's just focus on this one for a second. The Dungeon of Perfection has 42 hit points, 35 of which are still remaining, and that's represented with the circle around the icon there. And I can see that I can raid for 5 damage. And the way that works is if I click onto one of those dungeons, you can see on the right is a loot bag, typical loot bag with 8 items in it. On the left is our dungeon, and you can see there's 8 attributes that correspond with attributes in the loot bag. And let's take this one here, Platinum Ring. You can see that that's able to cause 2 hit points of damage against demon spawn. And we try to be careful about making sure that we've matched loot attributes with our dungeon attributes, something that Locket's going to be speaking about in a minute. So next would be to raid the dungeon. But before doing that, it's worth talking about the strategy to raiding a dungeon. As you can see, there's different dungeons of which have different amount of hit points still remaining, and you're able to raid for different amount of damage. So there's a strategy around raiding dungeons, and it's worth saying that loot bags can only be used once per chapter, so you have to be careful how you use your loot bag. You could choose to raid a dungeon where you're going to inflict the most hit points. Now, if that dungeon then gets destroyed, then you perhaps receive more of those relics because you had caused more damage. But if it took a while for it to fall, then the relics that come out of it are going to be less rare. If you attack the dungeon that's weakest, then maybe that's the next one to fall. So that's good. You would have rarer relics. But if you weren't able to inflict a lot of damage on it, then less of those relics are going to come for you. Or you could decide that there's a particular order that you care about, which might give you better flex. But again, if it's not the next one to fall, then maybe those relics are less rare. So there's a balancing act here. And I would say that it's important to understand that you might take 20 loot bags to raid a dungeon. And so it really requires some cooperation outside of the game with other loot bag holders if you're going to successfully raid a dungeon. Going back to this Dungeon Perfection, I've decided that I'm going to raid this dungeon. That's the right one for me. One thing I'd say here is that there's no cost, there's no payment to us in doing this. This is a free-to-play game. You will pay gas fee to do this because the whole game's on chain. But we've really tried to optimize those gas prices as much as we can. The Dungeon of Perfection now gets defeated. All successful raiders will be eligible to claim relics. Again, there's no charge from us to claim, but you'll need to pay the gas to mint these NFTs. Locket's now going to talk about the relics that come out of the dungeon.
So yeah, as Damal mentioned, the relics make up the rewards for Chapter 1. If you hadn't already guessed, it's an NFT, and it is the Crypt's foundational asset. There are in total 42,672 of these tokens to be minted. And they're not all the same type. So this one you're looking at here is a skull, which is the rarest type, but there are 7 types in total. There are also 4 different materials. So this particular one is a gold skull. In terms of the other attributes that you can see on here, the first one is the provenance, which is stamped on at mint, and it indicates where the relic was found. So in this example, you can see it says chapter 1 there at the top. So that's the provenance of this relic. The other attributes assigned to a relic are displayed as the 6 icons at the bottom. So the bottom left one there is the order, and that in chapter 1 is dictated by the order of the dungeon in which they were found. And then the other 5 attributes are astral, element, pole, alignment, and greatness. So we intend to distribute these relics chapter by chapter. So we're starting off in chapter 1, where 720 of the rarest relics have been reserved for the original loot holders. As Damon has touched upon, the initial chapters are paving the way towards a 3D massively multiplayer online game. So effectively, we can look at these first chapters as kind of a fun way of distributing the asset, which will then later provide benefits in the final dungeon game. This chapter is still in quite early stages of development, so all of the details on exactly how the relics will play a part are in discussion, but these will likely be things like access to pre-sales, to token drops, in-game utility, and more. So yeah, if we can talk about the lore now. This is going to be all about how we incorporated the loot lore into our design. So loot lore is something we tried to take quite seriously, and it's close to our heart, given that the game exists within the lootverse, and we soon learned how important it is to be cohesive and make sure that any game in the lootverse kind of fits in with the laws. So in particular, we put focus on the way that the loot attributes are mapped against our dungeon attributes. So what I mean by that, by using an example, if you look at the first attribute there, the divine robe, you can see that it's mapped to the trapdoors. Or if you look at the dragon skin armor in the hunter section, then you can see it's mapped to the lightning bolts. So you can kind of think of the dungeon as being structured in exactly the same way as loot, in that every matching dungeon attribute also has the same kind of features as the corresponding loot attribute. So they have the same class. You can see the lightning bolts are also a hunter, and they also have the same rank. So like dragon skin armor, the lightning bolts have rank of 2. So all of these features, the perfect matches, the classes, the ranks, they're all taken into account in the scoring system. So for example, if you have the chest armor in your loot bag, and it has the same class and a higher rank than the dungeon attribute, then you'll get some hit points. If the dungeon attribute is perfectly matched, so that would be like the dragon skin armor against against the lightning bolts, then you'll also get some hit points. And additionally, the order of the dungeon is also taken into account. So if your loot item has the same order as the dungeon that you entered, you'll get some hit points. I'm not going to go into all of the detail on exactly how the scoring is done and how many hit points you get for each of those things. But if you do want to read up on it, then there's a section on it in the white paper. So that's it from me. You can take over again.
Great, thanks, Lockett. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything from us for today. Just a quick word on what's happening next. There's some various things happening in our Discord, so head on over there where we're around, and we'll be talking about exactly what that is and setting ourselves up for the game going live on the 27th of January. Thank you for listening.